What's up, guys? Me and Larson are back. We're at our last conference win totals. We already did the Big 12, already did the SEC, already did the ACC, RIP to the Pac-12. There's a couple Pac-12 teams in this conference now. One that I have my eye on. Hey, this is a big conference, so we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. 18 teams. Somehow, alphabetically, it starts with Illinois. So I'll let you go ahead and get started.
I don't know. Yeah, it is kind of weird that it starts so late in the alphabet. But yeah, this is like the mega conference now, the other mega conference with the SEC. Yeah, we'll start big time. There are obviously some contenders in here. The SEC has contenders. I don't think you can say about that the ACC and the Big 12 as far as contenders go, but we'll get to some here. We'll start with a team that's not a contender. We'll start with Illinois, sitting at about 5.5. It feels like Brett Bielema's seed is getting a little warm in Champaign. I think it is. They really don't have much talent. The win total probably could be a little bit less than 5.5. I will say I love an under here. I took an under 5.5. There's just not much talent on offense. Huge questions at offensive line. They lost some really good players. Luke Altmaier is their quarterback. And then defensively, not much to write home about. They were outside the top 60 last year. I don't think it's going to improve by much. Basically, a total rebuild at linebacker and defensive line after they lost some defensive players at that position. And they're going to play teams that are going to run the ball down their throat. I mean, Nebraska, Penn State, Rutgers, good offensive lines. I think they're going to get dominated. So,
yeah, you didn't even mention Kansas at a conference. I mean, I just think there's no way they win that game. I mean, they do have Kansas at home, but Kansas should run all over them. I like this pick. Like I said, I don't see any guaranteed wins. I mean, they'll get Eastern Illinois. Surely they'll beat Central Michigan. I mean, that's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the only two games that I can point to and say that they should win. So, yeah, I like this pick.
I mean, you're getting Nebraska, Penn State, and Oregon all on the road. You're getting Michigan at home. Got to go to Rutgers. Get to Rutgers. I think they're going to be tough. Also, Illinois last 8 games last year decided by one possession, and they went 5-3. And they finished 5-7. I mean, they could have been a lot worse. They could have been a 3-9 team for all we know. So 5.5. I played the under. It's one of my favorites in the conference. It would take some kind of crazy upset. I mean, you're gonna have to go beat Oregon or Michigan to get a 6th. So I don't see it happening. Going under there. On to Indiana, who made some noise. They hired Curt Cignetti from James Madison. I think we both really like the hire. I like him a lot. He seems.
I'm kind of surprised. Yeah,
cool.
Illinois is not a very big football brand. I'm kind of surprised they pulled him, especially considering he was probably the biggest name in the G5.
Yeah, they're putting some money his way. It sounds like they're going to really kind of bump up their resources, and I think Cignetti is a great place to start. They're also sitting at 5.5 for their win total. They got Curtis Rourke as their quarterback, who was pretty good at Ohio for a few years, who's going to know kind of how Cignetti works in terms of system. And I think that's a really great fit. They've got some good wide receivers. They've got a guy at receiver that can be all Big Ten. And they just took a bunch of JMU guys, which really isn't a bad thing because we mentioned JMU was a good group of 5 team. They won a lot of games in the 2 years that Cignetti was there. And so they're just going to take all of JMU's talent, move it to Indiana. And I think offensively they could end up being okay. Defensively they lost some guys. They got hurt in the spring portal. Really only had one guy coming back that had real experience. So, but they basically took JMU defensive players who were really good, a few of them who were all conference in the Sun Belt, and they took them in there. And I think that they're going to be okay. I actually do. I like the roster enough to look at Cignetti himself, who's a winner and who made sure to point that out at media days, who has never had a losing season in 13 years. And I think I trust him with the roster. I really do. And then we can go over this. We'll go over the schedule. I think 5.5 is a good over. I think they can go over. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I think the key here is going to be at UCLA. If they could start 4-0, that would be huge because then you're staring down Maryland, Northwestern, and Nebraska, which is 3 winnable games.
Yeah.
You throw in Michigan State and Purdue later in the season. There's games that they could win. I'm not going to take this just because I feel like 5.5 is a really good number. I feel like that's the right number for them. But I wouldn't be surprised if they won 6 games. 7, probably stretching that a little bit. But if they could beat UCLA, I mean, Deshaun Foster's a brand new coach. If they could beat UCLA, they could easily start. Hell, they maybe could start 5-0. If they start 5-0, you're going to be feeling really good about this.
No, I mean, I think they could be. I think they could be 4-2, or maybe even 5-1 going into their bye week, and then they get Nebraska. Also, they're not going to beat Ohio State, but they do get Ohio State before they play Michigan. I think there are a lot of winnable games on the schedule, though, and I'm going to trust Cignetti, and I think that he can kind of put some pieces together. Not to mention they're going to have 2 weeks to kind of figure it out before they go on the road to UCLA. You're going to have 2 gimmies to basically work out some kinks. I think that'll help. And you mentioned UCLA is like, this is not a UCLA team that is going to be that good. So I think Indiana's got the pieces. I like the move a lot. They're going to be fun to watch for me, I think. So I'm going to take over 5.5 there. I like that. Moving
That's not
on.
something people say very often.
No. Yeah, let's bookmark that. I'm going to keep my eyes on Indiana this year. Going to Iowa, sitting at 8 or maybe 8.5, depending on what you can find. We all know the story with Iowa. Obviously, the offense is just watching paint dry. The defense is still going to be dominant. Was top 10 last year. They allowed 14 points per game last year, and that's not even accounting for how many pick sixes and scoop and scores did they have. And they lost, like, Cooper DeJean is the guy everybody knows. They lose him, and they lose some guys. Depth might be a small issue, kind of scattered around the unit, but they return, like, their best linebacker. They return their best safety. They return 8 starters. The defense is going to be the exact same. And they brought in Tim Lester, who's offensive coordinator, who was a Western Michigan coach. He was an offensive analyst for the Packers. Cade McNamara is back. Their best receiver's back. And despite losing some guys on the offensive line, it's still a very experienced group. I think the offense, which is obviously where they're going to put all their focus into, can take a little bit of a step up. I think, which anything is better than last year. But
I was about to say, we're going
to take whatever we can get. But they're at 8 or 8.5. I don't know if that entices you at all.
I would take it at 8. I did not get 8, but I've seen 8, and I think at 8 you're looking like at a push at worst. I think 8 would be a good number. 8.5 is a little too. It's a little too creepy for me, especially because if you are a low scoring team, bad teams can hang around. Like, that's my main problem with Iowa, and we saw it a lot last year. They were in competitive games, these under 27-point games against teams that they should have been blowing out. But the schedule's not bad at all. I mean, Iowa State. Iowa State's obviously going to be a tough out-of-conference game, but I think they can handle most of the teams on the schedule.
Yeah, Washington. Let's see. They'll get Washington, Michigan State, Northwestern. Those are 3 winnable games. Maryland is definitely winnable. Minnesota is definitely winnable. So the bet for me, because I actually thought about possibly playing an over, but I think the bet for me is going over 5.5 conference wins. I got it at plus money, which I felt was too good. They've got to go 6-3 basically in their conference, and they're going to play at Ohio State. That's obviously probably a loss. I guess I think Nebraska. I like Nebraska. That's the last game of the season. If they could lose that, but that is at home. Maybe they get tripped up going to UCLA. They play Wisconsin at home. There are games there that they could lose, but I really think 6 wins in conference is doable. And especially at plus money, that's an easy hedge spot too. If they're 5-3 going into Nebraska,
their only conference road game that I would call difficult is Ohio State.
Yeah, no, every other game really is winnable, especially with, like, we've seen them play harder teams like Ohio State, for example, and the defense is so good that they can just trick opponents into just, like, sucking basically. And we saw it with Ohio State, like, last year or 2 years ago when I think it was close for the first half, but they can do that. And I think at plus money to go 6-3 in conference is a really good bet, because if they go 5-4 in conference, I think that's a huge disappointment, really, for Iowa team with some high expectations. So if you want to get fancy, they're plus 600 to make the playoff if they go 6-2 or something like that. But that's the bet for me, is the conference wins. I like that.
Not bad.
We got burned on this team last year, Maryland. The Terps, who lost an absolutely abysmal game at Illinois, a game that they had in the bag and they couldn't pull through. That would have really sealed the win total, and didn't get that happen. They're back at 6.5. Lil Tua is gone. He was basically their entire offense.
Denied. It got denied.
Yeah, denied.
Well, he tried to go to Miami anyways. I think he would have been gone anyways. Didn't he try to go to Miami? Wasn't that a thing?
That probably was. Yeah, I think so. So he was out anyway, but there was so much production coming from him. I think he had 77 career touchdowns, tons of passing yards. And they go to a quarterback battle with Billy Edwards, who was the backup, who was not very good in their bowl win, that destruction of Auburn. Didn't look very good. They also got MJ Morris, who came from NC State, who isn't exactly turning heads. So there's a big question at quarterback. They're probably going to play both. I don't know. I like Roman Hemby at running back. He was good last year. Their wide receiver room's fine with a lot of experience. Their offensive line, though, is the big question. Huge question mark on offense, and might be honestly the worst in the conference, which isn't good. And then their defense last year, top 30 nationally, and was not too bad. Has a really good linebacker coming back. Ruben Hippolyte's their best player. I think the defense is going to be fine. It's just offense, like offensive line and quarterback questions. That's not really something I want to tangle with. But I mean, schedule wise, they benefit more than almost anybody from the divisions going away. There's no Ohio State anymore. There's no Michigan and Penn State, all those things. So hopefully they can turn around with this schedule at 6.5. But I don't see anything from them.
Yeah, no, my notes specifically say I'm not doing the Maryland thing again. Don't let Larson talk you into it. So no more Maryland. I'm done with it.
No, it's definitely no for me. They could start hot, but the back of the schedule is
that's what happens to them every year, though. They start 5-0 or 6-0, and we're like, oh, Maryland's averaging like 500 yards a game, and then they lose like 6 games in a row.
They're going to get USC. They're at Minnesota. They're at Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, and at Penn State. That's not an easy. Like they may go winless in November, really. So if you're going to take it over here,
would be on brand.
You need to get that early in the season. That's typical with Maryland. So I'm going to stay away this year for sure. First kind of contender, if you want to call them that, of the conference, it's Michigan, a team who won the national championship last year, and now by all the looks of it is going to take a huge step back. They are 4th in the conference in terms of odds to win it. They're plus 700, losing a lot of talent defensively, offensively, all across the team. There are going to be some holes from last year. I'm really not sold on Alex Orji. I don't think at quarterback. I mean, he's obviously had limited playing time, but I have my doubts. And the offensive line goes from like probably the best in the country to now having some question marks there. All 5 offensive line starters are gone. You lose Corum and Roman Wilson and all these guys that we came to know. They're gone. It's really just like it's Orji and it's Colson Loveland at tight end and it's Donovan Edwards. And I think you look at teams like Ohio State and Oregon who can replace and reload these players really well. I don't think Michigan's doing that. And so they're sitting at like 8.5 or 9 for a win total. They're not going to be, I think, one of the main contenders. I see them taking a big step back. I would play an under. I'm not going to, but I can see 4 or 5 losses when you look at the schedule.
Yeah, I would lean to the under. So when you think about it this way, if you got them at 9, you're basically saying, they beat one of Texas, Oregon, or Ohio State. That's the number 2, 3, and 4 team in the country. Like that's kind of a tall task. And then the rest of their schedule is not very difficult, but you still got USC on there. You still got Washington on there. And God, what if they're asleep at the wheel at Indiana or against Northwestern?
I'm glad you said that. I was about to mention that. Yeah.
It's just like it's like when we were talking about Texas with the SEC. I'm like, they really going to play perfect ball? I know this is not the standard that Texas is at. In terms of the win total. But, I mean, do you really think they're going to beat one of those teams and then just be flawless the rest of the year? I don't see it. I still think they're going to be, like, a tough football team. But, I tend to agree with you here.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to find their odds to make the college football playoff. I want to say the best no is minus 180 to make the playoff. So this is clearly a team I think Vegas and a lot of people think will fall back a little bit. And you mentioned it. I mean, they get Texas, USC, Oregon, and Ohio State. Those are 4 really tough games, especially with I can't.
And they got to go to Washington. They got to
go to Washington, which is a long trip, which Washington will have obviously all eyes on. Like that's a huge revenge spot. I think it does. It's kind of weird. This is like the Auburn factor almost. Michigan plays 1 road game through the first 7 weeks of the season. 1 road game, which is just kind of stupid. I hate when teams play all these games at home like that. But they're still going to be a good team. They can win 8 games. I think 9 is probably a stretch, but I can definitely see 4 or 5 losses here. So it's going to be a stay away from me. I would lean to the under. I think there are other teams in the Big Ten that can contend. On to Michigan State, how the mighty have fallen from whatever that magical season was a few years ago, maybe 2021. They're now sitting at 4.5 or 5 for a win total. It was a dreadful offense last year that scored 15 points per game. They had obviously all of the off the field drama. They bring in Jonathan Smith, who I really like and I think is a really good coach at Oregon State. Give him time. He will figure it out. He brought in a pretty good quarterback, Aiden Childs, who was a 4-star out of high school, who it sounds like everyone at Oregon State liked him. He's kind of the future. Offensively, I think they're a little bare. They lost a lot of wide receivers. They lost some tight ends. Offensive line was pretty mediocre and lost 3 starters. So it's really a total rebuild. The only strength you could find on the team, really, other than like special teams, one of the better special teams units in the conference, would be linebackers and secondary was kind of filled with 4-star guys that Tucker had brought in from his staff, and they ended up staying. So there is talent like in that side of the defense, but even like the defensive line was going to be strong and basically lost everybody in the portal. It's a team that does not have really that much talent, and they're looking ahead to next year. It's year 0. It's a total rebuild for Jonathan Smith. So let's talk to me next year. It's going to be nothing for me. It would be an under if I had to play anything, but I'm going to go with nothing.
I disagree. I'm going to lean over, just slight lean. This is not a pick. I'm really bullish on Jonathan Smith and Aiden Childs. I think they could start 4-0. And I mean, at that point, if you're at 5, you just need one more. And then you see Indiana, Illinois, Purdue. They do have a brutal stretch where they go Ohio State at home, at Oregon, at home against Iowa, and then at Michigan. That's not going to be a fun stretch for them. That's a lot of rivalry games. They're probably going to get their teeth kicked in. But at the end of the schedule, I think they could be hanging around there. I would barely lean over just because I love the coach and the quarterback, but that's pretty much the only logic behind that. So I'm not going to give that out as a pick.
Well, looking at the schedule, though, it is easy to see that Florida Atlantic, Maryland, Prairie View, those are 3. They can go to Boston College and win for 4, and then you get Illinois and Purdue for 5. One of those could be for 5. I think that's the world there. They do play the 3 worst teams in the conference, really.
You just have to be prepared because they're not going to win a game for a month. Like that's what we talk about with these teams.
Don't expect any wins between September 28th and possibly November 26th.
Yeah. If you're going to go winless for a month.
Yeah, I see that.
You're going to be biting your nails over it. So
that'll be fun to watch. I think again, that's a next year thing. I'm going to give Jonathan Smith some time. I think he can do some good things there. On to Minnesota, who kind of weird, like the PJ Fleck stuff in terms of, I think we touched on this last year too. Like, does he want to leave or stay? It sounds like he really wants to leave. Stuff I read and saw was talking about he was calling people about jobs before their bowl game last year. I think he probably has one foot out the door. This is a program that's kind of gone downhill since whatever that season was. They were really good.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I don't know who would want him. Minnesota football bores me to tears. Like I don't have any thoughts or feelings about them. Sometimes they have a sick running back. That's usually the most I can say.
Well, and they might this year. Mo Ibrahim's not there anymore, but they do have Darius Taylor, who was a guy that got some carries last year and was really good. Had a great bowl game. He's going to be the number 1 option this year. And their offensive line, like normal, will be really good. Will be veteran, and they can run the ball behind that. Ethan Kaliakmanis, the Greek gunslinger, he's gone, which is probably a good thing. They brought in a pretty good FCS quarterback from New Hampshire who threw the ball all over the place last year. So maybe the offense can do some good things. Defensively, not really sure. They're returning some guys at different levels. The secondary had a lot of talent last year, but they're gonna fall back after they lost some guys. So it's a pretty mediocre roster. I think it makes sense that they're at 5.5. I don't have a bet on here. I would probably lean under just because I feel like if this goes south quickly, which they're going to hit North Carolina in week 1, they've got Iowa, Michigan, USC in 3 straight weeks. If things go south, I wonder if there's just like a total give up with this team. That would be the reason for an under, but I'm going to stay away. I really want nothing to do with them. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's completely how I feel. That between them and North Carolina, both of them, which I both don't think are going to be that great this year. Like that's probably going to decide both their win totals that game. And I want no part of that game. So I think I'm just going to stay away from both.
Yeah, I was about to say, I find it very hard to see them losing North Carolina and still winning 6 games. I don't see that at all. So stay away there. But moving on to a team that I think maybe regrettably I'm really high on. I don't know. Nebraska at 7.5. There is hype. There's a hype train. It's full speed, headed for Lincoln. I might be driving it. I think that there is like a big season in store for them. And I know people want to say it's Nebraska, this and that. It's kind of like Miami. You see the logo and it kind of makes you sit back in your seat. But I like Matt Rule a lot, and it's year 2, and we've seen what he does in year 2 and year 3 at these schools. And this is by far the most talent that Nebraska's had in a long time. I mean, it doesn't even start with like you have Raiola, who's obviously the 5-star guy. We know plenty about him, who it sounds like is doing very well through offseason and everything like that. But like even wide receivers, they went and grabbed Isaiah Nair from Texas. They grabbed Jamal Banks from Wake Forest, who they've said has been really good. They like him a lot. The weapons, they've improved all their weapons on offense. The trenches, which was a place they struggled with last year, the trenches have now gotten so much better. They can probably rival anybody in the conference in terms of offensive and defensive line. And the defense last year was so good. 11th nationally. Defensive line has 3 NFL prospects on it. They've got a secondary that's could be probably the weakness of the group if you want to say that, but their leading tackler comes from their secondary. I think the defense is going to be just as good. Like this defense will be good if they had to stop the turnover problems. And that was the Jeff Sims thing last year, which obviously Raiola, I haven't seen him play a snap yet, but I'm going to assume that he is an upgrade from Jeff Sims. And I like the roster a lot. The schedule is easy. 7.5. I think they're going over. It's one of my favorite bets.
Come on, dude. You want to know what my notes say?
I'm worried
don't
here.
Bet on Nebraska. Don't listen to Larsen. He's going to try to talk you into Nebraska. Don't bet on Nebraska. So I'm not betting on Nebraska. Thank you, though. I thought that was very compelling. Don't worry. You almost got me, and then I remembered why I wrote this down. I'm not betting on Nebraska.
I'll keep going then. They lost 3 games.
You can be the smart guy in the room if they end up pulling this off. After Colorado last year, I'm done with them forever, probably.
They lost 3 games last year, 13-10 exact scores. And in those 3 games, they had 12 turnovers. They had 31 turnovers all season, which was the worst in the NCAA. This year, schedule-wise, no Michigan, no Oregon, no Penn State. They get Purdue, they get Illinois. You're going to get 2 easy non-conference games. You're going to get Colorado at home. They go to Indiana. It's a lot of winnable spots. Like they could definitely start 6-0 or 6-1, possibly 7-0 before they go to Ohio State. UCLA has to come to Nebraska. I'm not sold on UCLA. I think that there's just a lot of upside for this team. They return a lot of guys. The returning production is great. So, I may feel stupid. I'm driving the train, and you're gonna hate that I did play a little bit of 16-1 to make the playoff.
You disgust me. You disgust me.
So I'm gonna.
Do you not remember the 2 of us standing together at Paloma Park watching them just absolutely melt?
Yes. I mean, look, I know. We're gonna see.
It's fine. It's fine, man. It's fine. You did it with Miami too, and I told you I'm not betting on Miami either. So yeah, you can keep blowing that trumpet too. I'm done with both of these guys. So
how about a team that killed you last year? Not West Virginia, but Northwestern.
CUC.
Yeah, crazy season. I mean, I think they were at 2.5 or 3, and they finished with 8 wins. I don't really like that.
As soon as all this stuff came out about Pat Fitzgerald and it like just started kind of like coming out on the internet, I immediately ran and placed like a ton on their win total. I was like, oh, these guys are finished. And then like the next day they had taken it off the board, and I was like, oh, I'm Mr. Smart Man, just putting the hammer down on Northwestern. And then they come out and win 8 games. Hey, shout out. Is it David Braun? I believe is his name. Yeah. Shout out to him, man. He's a hell of a coach apparently.
So they're sitting at 4.5 this year for their win total. I think we texted about it before, and you were like, I'm not touching them after what happened last year, which makes sense. But there's this. They lost their quarterback, their best offensive lineman, their best linebacker, tons of guys from what was actually a really good secondary last year. That's now ripped apart. They lost a lot of players, a lot of guys. Mike Wright is in their quarterback room now from Vanderbilt. Kind of strange. Wow. He could be the starter. Yeah.
The guy's going for the academic triple crown. He needs to hit like week after this or something.
He really is. I was surprised to see that. They don't have much talent on this roster. And look, they didn't last year. They won 8 games, but they won basically every single coin flip game that could have happened. And they were also plus 13 in turnover margin last year. Ring the regression bell, the turnover regression bell. That's going to come and bite them. You've got to win or you've got to lose a lot of those coin flip games this year, I would imagine. Not to mention they're doing that home stadium renovation. They're playing in their practice facility and at Soldier Field, which is just a little strange, I think. Not to mention the back half of the schedule, Wisconsin at Iowa. Those are tough. They at Purdue might be a breath of fresh air, but you're on the road. Then it's Ohio State and at Michigan. That's pretty brutal. Those possibly are all losses. They do play Indiana, who of course I like. They're going to start off the season with Miami of Ohio, who isn't a bad team. I think they're favored to win the MAC. They beat Cincinnati last year. They're going to play Duke. Eastern Illinois is really the one game that's a penciled-in win. After that, I don't know. I mean, even like Illinois here is going to be awful. I mean, they play Illinois into the season. That could be a loss. So I would love it under 4.5. I have not bet it, but it's definitely in the waiting room for me.
So. Yeah, something we should also consider week one. Please remind me of this. Their weird lake stadium. It might be like crazy windy, apparently. So their unders could be a play early in the year. A lot of missed kicks, a lot of errant passes and such.
Yes.
I don't remember who I saw that from. I believe I saw it on Twitter, but I'm going to coin that idea as my own.
That's good info, though.
Yeah, no, I keep forgetting. It's like literally on the lake, like, and that it's crazy windy.
It is.
So
they're minus
my contribution for Northwestern after they burned me last year.
Yeah, they're -4 against Miami of Ohio week one. I just think Miami of Ohio is not a bad team. I would lead. If you could find a 5, I would absolutely put an irresponsible amount of money on an under 5 for Northwestern. I still might play under 4.5. I see it at even money. I'm going to make – if David Bronner wins 5 games, man, good for you. He's
probably getting another job if he wins 5 games.
Seriously. He'll be gone. He'll be at a bigger school. Yeah, so moving on to Ohio State. Obviously, number 2 overall team probably in the country, second best odds to win the championship. It's Chip Kelly in at offensive coordinator. Will Howard is in at quarterback. I didn't realize kind of their quarterback room, a little interesting situation between Will Howard, who comes from Kansas State. They've got Devin Brown, who was there last year, the guy who looks like a kicker. And then they got Julian Sayin from Alabama. So it's like, I guess any one of those guys could really step forward. Will Howard is a good quarterback for sure, who had his moments, but I mean, Kansas State was kind of like ready to move him along for Avery Johnson. So now he's going to go to Ohio State and be the difference maker. I don't know that totally. Obviously, we know Judkins comes in at running back is a huge thing, huge get, along with whatever his name is, Trayvon Henderson. So they're loaded at all the positions. The defense is going to be probably one of the best in the country. They got Caleb Downs. Defensive line's great. It's all the talent that we know Ohio State to have. And at 10.5, I mean, I'm not going to play a win total there or anything like that. But I'll say this. I feel a lot better about Oregon than I do Ohio State. I'll say that.
That's fine. I'm taking both of them. Those were the 2 I told you I didn't feel very good about. We'll talk about Oregon next. It's the best roster in the country. You're going to give me 2 games with them?
Yeah.
And look, I'm looking at the schedule right here. We already talked about Michigan. At Penn State, I'll be in the building for that game, so my hopes and dreams may be crumbling live in front of me in Happy Valley. But then they play at Oregon, which is obviously a completely losable game. But if I'm taking the Oregon win total, it sounds like I'm, robbing Peter to pay Paul a little bit if I got both of these teams. And other than that, I don't see them losing any of these games. No. If they don't win 11 games, Ryan Day will be fired. It's pretty much the simplest way to put it when you really think about it. If they win 10 games this year, Ryan Day will probably get fired.
It would be really funny to see if they struggle with Indiana the week before Michigan. But this is also I know they've lost to Michigan 3 years in a row, but this is the year that if they lost, I mean, I don't know what you say.
That is I don't know if he'll make it off the field fired.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I would look out too for some sneaky spots. I mean, Iowa right before the Oregon game could be something. Nebraska, Ohio State comes off a bye to play Nebraska, but it's right before they go to Penn State. That could be a little interesting too. But yeah, I mean, you're going to need 2 losses to go under. It's probably the best roster in the country. I'm not going to play anything, but I will say for the next team, Oregon, who I think probably isn't equally as loaded, but is still very, very good at every position. And we know Dan Lanning has done great things, and people keep saying he's building an SEC program on the West Coast, which he really is. The big difference for me between Ohio State and Oregon is I just feel much more comfortable with Dylan Gabriel than I do Will Howard. the wide receivers, Oregon can match Ohio State's wide receivers, probably a wash when you compare those with Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart. Offensive line will be good. They're really good in the trenches on both sides, and running back, tight end, skill positions, they are great. Defensive end, they are great. They got probably the best corner, one of the best corners in the country. Jabbar Muhammad comes from Washington, solidifies a really good defense. So they've just recruited at such a high level. Even their portal classes have been amazing. Anytime that there's a hole or a question mark on this team, they fill it instantly. I think they're doing great work. They're also at 10.5 like Ohio State. And I think Ohio State, like if you're going to go over for Ohio State, it's probably minus 150. I think you can get an even money for an over 10.5 on Oregon. That would be the bet for me, or just play them plus 210 to win the Big Ten. I am really high on Oregon. I think for my money, they're the best team. Even slightly, they're the best team in the conference.
I think that they're the class of this conference. I think when you talk about the three contenders this year, my eyes are on Oregon, Georgia, and Ohio State. Yeah. I also have an over on them. Like I said, Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, Ferguson at tight end, the talent on defense. And their schedule, too, isn't ridiculous. Like I said, you obviously have the Ohio State game, but you're opening with Idaho, Boise State, and Oregon State. They should trounce all three of those. They should make lunch meat out of UCLA, Michigan State. Maybe you have a tough game at Michigan on November 2nd, but if you can survive that, I think they'll be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also interesting. They have a bye week. Their second bye week is the second to last week of the season, right before Thanksgiving weekend. They're going to play Washington. I just think that's kind of important, especially if this team's going to contend and probably be in the Big Ten championship. Give them at least a little bit of a rest advantage over whoever they may play. I think that's important. The bet for me is just going to be to bet them to win the Big Ten. I think they'll at least be in the game. It's at least a hedge spot. So I like Oregon a lot. Like you said, this is a national title team in my eyes. I like the Ducks a lot.
Oh, and their uniforms this year, the new gang green uniforms, those are maybe my new favorite in college football.
Yes.
I'm usually not the type that just like gobble on Oregon's knob over their uniforms. The new ones, the new green ones are so sick. They are so sick. Love them.
Yeah, no, they do it right. And they've got Phil Knight knows what he's doing up there.
Yep.
Someone who may not know what they're doing, James Franklin at Penn State, who I'm so tired of hearing, like, everywhere you turn, it's like, well, if the 12-team playoff was around for the last decade, Penn State would have made it the most times. Like, that's great. I don't care. The 12-team playoff wasn't around. However, they're, I think, minus 140 to make the playoff this year, which feels right with a win total that's at 9.5 is heavily juiced to the over. At 10.5 is juiced to the under. This feels like a 10-2 team, which is what we say every year. They get Ohio State. They don't play Michigan. They don't play Oregon, and they don't play Iowa. That's important, I think. And the biggest get for them, really, it's not any player. Drew Aller making the next step will be important. He was inconsistent last year. Nick Singleton's a great running back. They got Julian Fleming, a wide receiver, to kind of fill Keandre Lambert-Smith's spot. He left for Auburn. So I think the offense is going to be good. The big get for them was Andy Kotelnicki, the OC from Kansas, who is explosive. We saw what he can do at Kansas with the way he can run these plays. A lot of pre-snap motion, things like that. They should be much more fun to watch on that side of the ball. I really like the hire there. I think that's going to make a world of difference, especially if Aller can just take a little bit of a step up. And then, like,
it's just like, oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like we predicted last year, their defense, we said this was going to be one of the best defenses in the country, and it was. They gave up less than 2 touchdowns per game. They were number 2 in the country. And they got Tom Allen, who from Indiana, to come and be the defensive coordinator. They've still got a lot of talent on the defense. Like, I think the defense is still going to be really good. If Kotelnicki can make that offense jump a little bit, I think that they're good. They get Ohio State at home, like you said, you're going to it. That's going to be sick. I think they're a playoff team for sure.
Yeah, so here's what's interesting about them. Remember, we made this exact same point last year, back with the old Big Ten. They played Ohio State and they played Michigan. You know what we said? We said they can lose their 2 hardest games and the total will still hit because it was the same number last year. It's the same case this year. They can lose to USC, which I actually don't think they will, and they can lose to Ohio State. And guess what? They'll still hit their win total. So for that reason, I would say this is a lean over. I don't know if I'm going to take it. It's kind of one of those things where my finger's just kind of hovering over the button.
Yeah.
But I see why it's juiced because it's the same thing as last year. Like I said, you could lose your 2 hardest games and win total. So you can't say that for most teams.
Yeah. I think too, week 1, they Their game last year with West Virginia, kind of boring. They dominate the whole time. They go to West Virginia this year in week 1 in a game where it looks like West Virginia is getting some sharp money. I think it's gone down to from plus 10.5 to plus.
I did have that in my notes that could be tricky.
Yeah, I think that could end up being a little trickier maybe than we think, especially if it maybe takes some time to gel with the new offense. But yeah, I mean, at USC is tough. At Wisconsin is tough. I hate that they go to Wisconsin right before Ohio State. That's a little tricky. But those are really the 3 that they need to watch out for. I think it's a pretty manageable schedule altogether, though. I would take them again. I'm looking, minus 140 to make the playoff. I feel like that's probably a good bet. Can they get in if they go 9-3? I think they still can. So that would be the bet from my perspective.
Fair.
Moving
a team
on,
that will not be making the playoff.
A team that will not be making the playoff is Purdue, who I actually like for all the bottom teams here, the teams that are in the basement of this conference. I think Purdue, I want to like them, and I can't really. Like Hudson Card is still there. Devin Mockabee is still there, who's actually not a bad running back, especially by Purdue standards. He's been pretty good. But their offensive line is super questionable. They lost everything at wide receiver. And it really, the real stab in the heart was losing Nick Scourton, who is a tremendous defensive lineman who goes to Texas A&M. So the defense was bad last year. I don't see them improving that much, but I do like their coach, Ryan Walters, who was a really good defensive guy for Illinois. And there's a lot of work to do, but I feel like I like him, and I want to like this team, but they're at 4.5, and it's juiced to the under. And you get at Wisconsin, you get Oregon, you get at Ohio State, you get Penn State, and then you get Notre Dame in non-conference. So it's
That's what I was gonna say, man. The schedule is just, dude. Yeah. I don't know who they upset.
No, probably no one. I mean,
I mean at the scheduling office. I don't know who they upset at the scheduling office. They don't upset any of these teams. That's a lot of crooked numbers in the next to these teams in the AP poll. 7, 3, 2, and 8 for a team that just wasn't that great to begin with. It's an uphill fight.
Yeah, it's brutal. Not to mention even like Indiana and Illinois are probably their when you say Indiana, Illinois, and Northwestern are their easiest games, and 2 of those are on the road. That's not good. So it's a stay away from this team.
It's so weird they're going to Corvallis, which I thought was strange. But
yeah, little non-conference game right after Notre Dame and right before Nebraska. Yikes. Here's one I like. I got the shirt on. I think we had them last year. We had them last year.
I bet on them every week last year too.
And they hit easily. I mean, it went perfectly last year. We said this could hit by like week 5, and it did. Rutgers at 6.5. The State University of New Jersey. They bring in Ethan Kaliakmanis to be their quarterback, who has been very iffy. But what they're going to do, they pair him with offensive coordinator Kirk Sriracha, who he's been with before at Minnesota. That's going to help him a lot. Hey, just take the snap and hand the ball off to the Big Ten's leading rusher, Kyle Monagai. That guy's a boss. I like him a lot. They returned 2 wide receivers who were good last year. They dipped into the portal and got the FCS best wide receiver. I like the wide receiver core. That can work. And the offensive line returns a lot of experience. It needs to improve a little bit, but I'm not worried about that. If they could improve like in the passing game and get any bit of a passing game to make it a little bit less predictable so that they're not running 100% of the time, that will help. But I think the offense can work. And then the defense, the real strength, ranked 16th nationally last year in the defense. They gave up 20 points per game on a schedule that had Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and Maryland, which is pretty impressive. They returned 8 starters. They're all seniors. There's talent and depth at all 3 levels. I'm looking for a big year for the defense that I think could go from wherever it was 30th maybe last year to top 20 will be huge. And then also, like we said, I think with Maryland, what a benefit. No more divisions. You're not playing Michigan and Penn State and Ohio State anymore. And in fact, they don't play Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, or Iowa. I mean, that's crazy. This is probably the easiest schedule in the Big Ten. They're at 6.5. I like it over 6.5. There's some plus money out there. I also found a 6 at minus 150. I hammered that. I like a big year from Rutgers. Do you feel it? Do you agree?
Buddy, I'm always feeling Rutgers. You know that to be. You just know that's gospel. I hate they play at Virginia Tech. They probably won't win that game. But you got UCLA at home. Oh man, Friday night at 11 p.m. at USC. I will be betting a healthy amount on Rutgers for that game.
I can't wait.
Just riding with the boys. Maryland, Minnesota, Michigan State, Illinois. I'm just reading winnable game after winnable game. I've been high on him since last year. I'm a Greg Schiano believer. I'm a Rutgers believer. RIP James Gandolfini. And I actually got him at 6 too. It's crazy juice, but I got him at 6. I feel great. That's probably a hook at worst. But hey, I love him. I like Rutgers this year.
No, I mean, I honestly, like I've mentioned before, like I project what I think the win total would be before I look at the real win total. I was like, why can't they win 8 games? I mean, they could clear 6.5. And so Virginia Tech, like you mentioned, they go to Virginia Tech early in the year, but Rutgers is going to punch them in the mouth. And Virginia Tech wants to run with drones. They want to run, and Rutgers is going to take that away. The best part here that I like about this schedule is week 5. They play Washington on a Friday night in Piscataway. So Washington's going to fly across the country to New Jersey to play Rutgers. The next week, Washington hosts Michigan, which is obviously the national championship revenge spot. Everyone in Washington is going to be focused on that game. It's just huge between the travel and the look ahead. It's a great look ahead spot. It's a perfect spot for Rutgers. I love that. And then they end the last 4 games of the schedule: Minnesota, Maryland, Illinois, and Michigan State. Those are 4 winnable games. I like it a lot.
They could go winless for basically a month and a half on this schedule. Let's say they don't win a game from Virginia Tech to USC. They could still hit 6.
Still be fine.
They could still hit 6. Yeah.
And they would have to lose at home to Washington. They'd have to lose at home to UCLA, who is up next. I don't see it with them. The other key, I mean, they're going to play teams with not very good defensive lines, which when you look at Rutgers wants to run the ball a ton. Who has a defensive line that can stop them? Really nobody. I guess you could say USC, but that's kind of questionable. But like Nebraska, Minnesota, Maryland, Washington, not very good defensive lines at all. I think Rutgers has a huge matchup advantage in that. So I love over 6.5. I love the Scarlet Knights this year. And then a team that I do not like, I've mentioned a few times, UCLA sitting at 4.5 and 5. That feels about right. I was so off just even watching new coach Deshaun Foster at media days, because obviously Chip Kelly left in the middle of the night and goes to Ohio State. They hired Deshaun Foster, who has basically no coaching experience. I don't think he's ever been a coordinator. And then he gets up at media days on the stage and just looks totally flustered. There's just no confidence. No, he doesn't exude any confidence. Like I don't see anything about him that would scream to me that he can win with this team, especially a team that doesn't have, all the talent in the world. I like their running back a lot. Garbers is back at quarterback with his top wide receiver.
I don't like Ethan Garbers though.
Right, Ethan Garbers. The reason Ethan Garbers was good last year was because he wasn't Dante Moore, who came in and would throw 3 interceptions and lose me money. So Garbers looked good from that perspective, but then the defense last year was top 10, a great defense. And then that was all Danton Lynn, who's the defensive coordinator who now jumps ship and goes to USC. They lose their 2 best players, including Latu, who was a top 15 pick. They only returned 40% of their tackles from last year. And it's the secondary that was the strength last year of the defense benefited a lot from how much pressure UCLA's defense got. It's now a totally new secondary that could be exposed with Hawaii's going to throw it around. LSU and Oregon, USC are going to throw it around. I mean, Indiana might throw it around. I hate the front part of the schedule, and I'll let you read off some stuff you think from the schedule. I don't like this team at all. I don't like this team early in the schedule at all. They're a total fade for me.
Picture this. I just want you to close your eyes for a second. I don't know if you're going to be joining me. I got tickets to UGA Clemson. Just picture this. Okay. You go to UGA Clemson. You have a long day at the bench. You watch Georgia beat Clemson. You go downtown, maybe have some dinner, have some drinks, and you look up at the smallest TV they got in the entire bar, the entire restaurant, up in that corner up there. And you know what it says? It says Hawaii's beating UCLA. I could just envision that right now. And just me and my drunken stupor be like, UCLA is losing to Hawaii right now. And then you look after that. Indiana, not an easy game. At LSU, good luck. Oregon, Penn State. This team could start 0-5.
Done.
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. It's not that much of a knock on Deshaun Foster. But, I thought Fran Brown was a super inexperienced coach until I saw this guy's resume. It's he's really only ever been a running backs coach. And you know what? Maybe he'll be good. Maybe he'll prove us wrong.
Well, Fran Brown at least went out and got guys with head coaching experience, Dino Babers, and has a 5-star quarterback and legit weapons that come back from the last year. UCLA does not have that. You didn't even mention they got to go all the way to Rutgers. They got to go to Nebraska. That's the other thing is like, look at these road trips they're going to take. They're going to fly to Hawaii. They're going to fly to LSU. They're going to fly to Penn State. Rutgers and Nebraska are on there. I mean, that's a brutal road trip. All of those games. So the other thing I'll say is I bet Hawaii plus 14 today in week 1. Who I've seen that's been steaming down.
You hadn't told me that, by the way, when I made my previous statement. So I just want that on the record.
No, yeah, we have not talked about that. I bet Hawaii right before we started the pod, just because Hawaii is going to throw it around. They sling it. Timmy Chain, the quarterback whisperer on the island. That's a weird place to go. We know it gets kind of strange out there, and you're going to get this brand new head coach and this brand new defense, basically. Going to go out there, and I think Hawaii just can have their way with them, and we'll see that with a bunch of teams, I think. So I took Hawaii plus 14. I think Hawaii can win the game for all I say, but that's an under for me for UCLA. I don't like them at all. Maybe next year, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think I'm glad we're on the same page here.
Run far away from UCLA. But
you want to know how much I have UCLA juiced at? By the way, I'm not even going to take this anymore.
Oh no, what is it?
It's minus 210.
For what? Under 4.5 or under 5?
5.5.
Under 5.5. Oh man, that still might be worth it. Honestly,
I think so. Honestly, that is such an outrageous number.
They could win 4 games. Like even Fresno State to end the season. Like.
I had my eye on that too. I was like, I don't think that's really a game. One of the best G5 teams in the past 20 years.
No, yeah, that's it. I like nothing about the Bruins. However, USC, on the other hand, I thought that I didn't like them, and then I kind of read up on them more. I'm not going to take anything. I don't have a bet here, but they're not as bad, I think, as I thought they were going to be. Miller Moss, or is it Jordan Maeva at quarterback, who was a dog for a day. I don't know who's going to be the quarterback there, but that's fine. I think they like both options. Zachariah Branch is great. Offensive line should be fine. There's talent all over the place on offense. And then defensively, kind of like Iowa's offense, the USC defense, we need to improve anything we can there. They go and get Danton Lynn from UCLA, who turned around that defense to make them one of the best in the country. So he even took like a few UCLA guys, pulled them over there with him. I think the defense, it can't get much worse, but I think the defense will improve with him for sure. It's just a matter of the schedule.
They have no margin for error. That was going to be.
They don't. It's 7.5, by the way, at the win total. 7.5. You can lose 4 games. LSU, Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, kind of tough. They're going to host Rutgers.
They got to go to Washington. It's one of the things where, like, do you really expect them to play perfect ball for the rest of the years if they lose all the games that they're supposed to lose? I don't see it.
They also play in November. They play Nebraska right before UCLA and then Notre Dame. So 2 big games for them. I wonder if Nebraska can go into the Coliseum and sneak one out. But they don't play any of the 5 teams, the 5 worst teams in the conference. So it kind of speaks to, like, there's really no easy game here except Utah State. So 7.5, no margin for error. I'm not going to take it. Overall, though, I think this team, people are saying that they're like the 5th best team in the conference, maybe. And in terms of odds, I mean, it's Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, and then USC's right there. So I think there's a world where they can contend, though, if they have some things break their way, win 8 or 9 games, maybe. But I'm not putting any money on it. I don't think you are. Stay away from me.
I've got my eye on that Rutgers game to bet.
Come on.
Bet the Scarlet Knights, though. Don't worry.
I
got my eye on that.
Washington, big season last year, national championship, losing the national championship, and then basically taking every single person from that team and moving them on. And Jed Fish comes in because DeBoer leaves. We like Jed Fish a lot. Good coach last year, good coach with Arizona, but this is a true year 0. Nobody here. It's a brand new team. Forget everything about last year, the stats and everything, because it's a totally different system, and they have 0 returning starters on offense. It's going to be Will Rogers at quarterback, who I kind of wouldn't mind seeing him like really shine. Like we kind of saw him do with Mississippi State a little bit with Leach, but he's going to have weapons. He's going to have good wide receivers. The leading rusher from Arizona is going to follow Fish up to Washington. Offensive line is young, not much experience there. That could be a little bit of a question mark, but the defense questions. Don't know really about the trenches. I don't think they can hold up. I mentioned that with Rutgers. They're going to be exposed by teams that can run the ball. At Rutgers, September 28th, before Michigan. It's a huge spot. Bet Rutgers. I think it's a big thing. Schedule-wise, they're probably going to start 4-0. They've got 4 easy ones before they play. It's Rutgers, Michigan, and Iowa. 2 of
all
those
at home, too.
Be careful with those 3 games.
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth. My notes say I think Jed Fish is a good coach, but I'm not touching this one. Maybe if he had brought Noah Fafita and Jalen McMillan with him, I'd consider this a little bit more. But no, this is a true stay away from me.
Yeah, Jed Fish here and Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. Talk to me next year. I'm going to put a pin in it. We're going to go back to go to next year. I'll look at you more. I don't have anything at 6.5 for Washington at all. And then lastly, in this 18-team conference, I will end it off with a bet here. I really like Wisconsin to go under 7.
That's not what I thought you were going to say. No,
yeah, I read over them once. Didn't have any opinion. I had a little bit of a lean, but I've read over them a few more times. And Fickle, I like Fickle a lot. It's not a knock on him as a coach. Like, I think he's a good coach, but the air raid did not work last year. Tanner Mordecai did not work. They struggled scoring against bottom-tier Big Ten teams, which you would think would be the easy part. No, they struggled with that. They bring in Tyler.
They should have lost to Georgia Southern. If Georgia Southern didn't throw 6 interceptions, they should have lost that game.
Was that Davis Brin?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. That was nice. And then speaking of turnover issues, they bring in Tyler Van Dyke, who had his fair share at Miami last year. He did finish the year strong, but that was after he got benched for the backup. They lose Braylon Allen, who was a really good running back. They have Ches Malusi there. They added Tyweek Walker, running back from Oklahoma. Not bought in on their wide receivers at all, which is kind of important when you run an air raid. And they should run the ball well. Like, that's what Wisconsin usually does. But they're not going to be a running offense. They're an air raid offense. So that's just a little bit of a concern to me. And then the big concern is the defensive line, which is usually kind of a strength for them, but only has 1 returner and does not look very promising at all. Secondary and linebackers will be fine, but they're not going to be able to get any pressure. Like, there's no pressure on quarterbacks. I think they're going to struggle against teams that run. Hello, Rutgers again. That's kind of the theme of the conference for me. So I look at that, and then I look at the schedule. There are a lot of tough games there.
You know what I have circled? I don't know if you've noticed what I've noticed on this schedule right now.
Let's see.
Careful is all I got to say.
With what? In terms of, you think they can win 8 games?
No, I'm talking about South Dakota in week 2. That's a good FCS team. I just love.
Now wait, that's not South Dakota State though, but it's South Dakota.
South Dakota's ranked 5th though. South Dakota went 10-2 last year.
All right,
so they're good. They're a solid squad too. South Dakota
right
State,
before
I'm well aware
Alabama.
of that, but right before Alabama.
Look ahead spot.
I'm just saying.
You're going to get Alabama. You go to USC, another loss. At Rutgers, loss. Penn State, loss. At Iowa, Oregon, at Nebraska. That's a lot of losable games. I mean, and considering like Rutgers, Iowa, and Nebraska are probably the swing games if you want to go over this. And I think they're bad matchups with Rutgers and Iowa. And Nebraska's hard on the road. I don't see 8 wins here at all unless like the air raid just comes together and Van Dyke has some kind of Heisman season or something. But I like the under 7 a lot.
That's interesting. I have 6.5, so I won't be playing this. I think that's
I would still play 6.5, honestly, especially if you get like plus money. I'll have
to check.
What are the wins right now? Western Michigan, South Dakota, Purdue, and Northwestern. That's 4. And then you've got to win 3 from Penn State, Iowa, Oregon, Nebraska, and Minnesota. I don't see that. Or unless they beat Alabama, I don't see that.
It is barely plus money at plus 105.
Yeah, I still think I think there's a 5-7 out there. I really do. I think there's a 5-7 or a 6-6, but I like the under for Wisconsin. So that is,
I'll ride with you.
That's my bet there. If you had to bet, who wins the conference for you? What's your conference championship?
I think we get an Oregon-Ohio State rematch, and I'll say Ohio State. The first one's at Eugene, right?
Yeah.
I'll say Ohio State wins the first one, Oregon wins the second one. How about that?
Yeah. I think that's probably the matchup. I like Oregon a lot there.
That's something breaking, by the way. So what a
great conference though. Like I like it. This is This is going to be fun. Go Rutgers. That's probably my biggest play. My best play. I like Rutgers.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think Rutgers is a great one. Oregon over 10.5. Since I'm double dipping them in Ohio State, I could get both, but I feel pretty good about at least getting one.
Yeah. I like it. Let's go.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Of course, if you made it this far, I'm sure you've watched all the other ones. Locks, week 0. I'm excited. We actually get to do this next week and give out some picks. That's one of our favorite videos to do every week. Week 1 will obviously have a little more substance, but we'll be there week 0 locks, and we'll see y'all next week.